Welcome back, Sebastian here. So time for my review for the 2025 Japanese Grand Prix. Overall, not the most exciting Grand Prix for sure. But that being said, it was a Grand Prix that had a pretty tight battle for the lead for almost the entirety of the Grand Prix. And I think a Grand Prix that coming into the weekend, pretty high risk of rain. I think there was a pretty, high level of expectation in terms of, what kind of Grand Prix we could have had today. But unfortunately, just not a ton of great racing, not a ton of tire degradation as well, and I think that definitely contributed as well. And just reality is that the Suzuka track is so narrow that for modern F1 cars you need a massive delta in order to realistically overtake the car in front. So let's get started with this review. Not to be a Debbie Downer. But we're going to get this review underway. So, started the race, pretty clean start. Verstappen obviously starting on pole position after his absolutely phenomenal pole lap. Honestly, that end of Q3 yesterday was probably more exciting than anything we saw at the race. I guess there was one moment that kind of could compete with that, but for the most part, definitely not the most exciting Grand Prix. So Norris started P2. Sainz was serving a three-place grid penalty for impeding Hamilton in qualifying yesterday. Hamilton, Bortoleto, Ocon all on the hard tires. Duel, Stroll on the softs, and everyone else was on the medium tires. And there were some wet patches at the start, so I was wondering maybe someone might, catch a wheel off, might push too hard, might spin or something. But no, start was very, very clean. Verstappen keeps his lead going into the first corner, and in fact, the entire top 10 maintained their same position after that initial opening lap. So not a whole lot happened. I think further back in the field, I think Bortoleto had a bit of a bad start, so he dropped down to the back. But other than that, not a ton of big changes for position. I think Lawson as well lost a position to Sonoda. Of course, dynamic there, being basically those two drivers being swapped coming into this Grand Prix. But yes, Sonoda in P13 after that opening lap ahead of Lawson. Lap 2, Antonelli misses the chicane at turn 16. So again, that was something that quite a few drivers did during the weekend, but not really being penalized too heavily. Not like, I think, unless the cars were basically right side by side going into that chicane, kind of like Perez and Leclerc in 2022. Unless there was a situation like that, they were being pretty lenient with that, not really considering it like track limits deletions like we see at other tracks like Austria, for example. We did get our first overtake of the race though on track, lap 6, Hamilton overtaking Hadjar for P7 at turn 1. Pretty straightforward movement again. Hamilton in the Ferrari, definitely in the faster car, so that is what you would expect. Lap 7, Verstappen builds up a 2-second gap over Norris, and Piastri sticking pretty well to the back of his sister McLaren. Lap 10, Norris sets the fastest lap of the race to eat into Verstappen's lead a bit, and Stroll starts the pit cycle, pitting from the soft tires onto the hard tires, I believe. Lap 13, Norris engineer comes over the radio, says there's no graining, and that is just going to be a thermal rear limited race, which is something that I don't think really panned out the way that the engineers thought. Really track tire degradation was very, very low today. We saw Antonelli, we'll talk about him a bit later, but we saw Antonelli go super, super long on that first stint on the medium tires, 30 laps or so. So again, just kind of showing how little tire degradation there was. Lap 16, Duel pits the other driver on the soft tires. Tsunoda's putting Gasly under pressure for P12, and Duel comes out ahead of Stroll. So kind of in a mini battle at the back of the field there between Duel and Stroll. Lap 17, Sainz was noted for going off at track and gaining an advantage, but eventually no further action for that. The field was so packed together at this point. I think the gap between Hamilton in P7 and Hadjar in P8 was about 3 to 4 seconds at this point. So there wasn't really a nice gap that the leaders could basically drop into like there has been, not necessarily last year, but I would say 2021, 2022 even. Again, the field spread was much, much bigger, and this is just a reality of the field spread being much tighter, that the front runners don't have these perfect gaps to just pit into about 20 laps or so into the race. So a lot of them, I think, were being pretty reluctant to pit for those pit stops. Lap 20, Piastri falling off a little bit the pace of the top two. Russell pits first of the leaders to pit, and kind of highlighting the point that I just said, he came out in P13. Lap 21, Piastri pits, comes out ninth, so again comes out ahead of Russell, and behind quite a few of the midfield drivers as well. Now this is where probably the only exciting point of the race happens, and quite oddly enough, the two race leaders, Norris and Verstappen, basically pit on the same lap. And usually it's pretty rare that race leaders will do this. Usually the driver behind will basically pit. They'll tell the driver behind to do the opposite of the race leader. So if the leader pits, basically do another lap and try to overcut them. Or if the leader doesn't pit, to come in and basically try to undercut them, right? Just to try to do something a little bit different on strategy, because usually there isn't enough variation in the pit stop times that it really makes a big difference. But no, that's not what happened here. They both pit the same lap, and I think Verstappen had a slightly slower stop than Norris, and as a result, Norris comes out of his box, like almost like a front wing length, behind Verstappen, very, very close, but he is in basically the slow lane, the lane that's basically the pit garage side. And so basically they're both coming down the pit exit, and you can technically overtake in the pit exit. You don't have to wait till you get back on track. But basically, Verstappen kind of squeezes him a little bit, but Norris basically had nowhere to go. He was clearly the car behind, and it's not like, you're racing on track and Verstappen has to give him room just because the pit lane's so narrow. So you can see, in the image, Verstappen's roughly still in the middle of the pit lane, and Norris has basically just driven straight from his pit box and gone straight onto the grass. So a little bit of a silly move, but again, in a race where there wasn't a whole lot of overtaking, he had to try to do something different. But again, trying to go onto the grass to overtake Verstappen was never really going to work. And it was kind of just an act of desperation. Then you had kind of the, pretty expectable, messages over the radio between the two of them. Norris saying that, Verstappen pushed him off. Verstappen saying that Norris basically went off the pit limiter too early. And it was just usual nonsense to potentially try to get the other investigated and get a penalty of some kind. But nothing came of that. It was noted, but it was not under further investigation, which I think was definitely the right call. We wouldn't want to have seen, for example, Verstappen getting a 5-second penalty, kind of like in Canada 2019, and basically then P2 just cruising at the back behind P1 and, taking the win, not on track. So that was really the big one, action point in the race. Otherwise, not a whole lot really happened. So Verstappen again comes out ahead, lap 26.5. Gasly, unfortunately for him, slow pit stop. So he actually, I think, dropped a position behind Tsunoda because of that. Lap 26, Sainz, again, a driver who was struggling quite a bit with the turn 16 chicane, cut it again. Lap 28, at this point, Antonelli became the youngest driver to ever lead a race, and he breaks Max Verstappen's record from the 2016 Spanish Grand Prix. So good on Antonelli. I do believe as well he would eventually go on to get fastest lap of the race. His tires were much younger than everyone else's, and eventually set the fastest lap of the race, becoming the youngest driver ever to set a fastest lap. So nice on Antonelli to get those records, 2 records in one race. Again, not quite a podium. He had 3 races to get youngest podium in F1. Australia, China, and then today wasn't able to do so, but does get youngest driver to lead a lap and youngest driver to get a fastest lap. So a bit of a small achievement there for Antonelli. Lap 28, we got a couple overtakes, but these weren't really true overtakes. These were overtakes where the driver who was being overtaken had yet to pit. So again, massive tire delta between the two drivers. So lap 28, Albon overtakes Bortoletto for P12. Lap 29, Albon then overtakes Ocon for P11. And lap 30, Hadjar overtakes Sainz for P10. And both 3 of those overtakes were at turn 1. Lap 31, Hamilton pits from the hard tires and comes back out in 7th. So not really able to do anything with that, really hoping for a safety car, virtual safety car, something to kind of shake things up and give him a bit of an advantage with his pit stop, and that was not the case. Lap 32, Antonelli, Lawson, basically still hadn't pit at this point, and I wrote, are they waiting for fires? Now, of course, one of the big talking points during practice was that fires were breaking out. Basically, the grass was catching fire multiple times through the practice sessions. I think if there had not been rain this morning, overnight, I think we seriously could have had a very different race if it had been dry the whole weekend. I think the odds of, basically a fire coming out and them having to throw a red flag at some point during the race were very, very high if there wasn't rain. It could have been a very different race. And, if that red flag comes during the pit cycle, that would have been added quite a lot of controversy to that, and I think it would have been a really bad look for the track if their grass is catching fire and basically directly impacting the results of the Grand Prix. But luckily, we had the rain this morning, tracked right out, and yeah, so the fires were kind of a non-story. But again, that was definitely a big story during the practice sessions this weekend. Antonelli Pitts comes out 6 ahead of Hamilton, but again, pushing very, very hard, and again, lots of radio messages as well. I think, let's see, actually, this image is from before Verstappen stopped, so actually, I think I got the order of the slides a bit wrong, but basically, Hamilton, again, pushing really hard before he pit, and almost basically got pretty close to Verstappen, but pitting that lap, again, not a big deal in the end. I think then, let's see, then we actually, no, this is, what is this? Oh, right, this is the other part. So basically, 10 laps into their second stint, after their pit stop, Piastri, again, pushing pretty hard, pretty good pace from him. He was basically within a second of Norris. And Norris at this point, it was about two and a bit seconds off of Verstappen's pace. So again, it was looking like, Norris was perhaps struggling a little bit with pace. Piastri looked really strong. Came over the radio basically asking, is this Norris's best pace? I can go faster. Trying to engineer, some kind of driver swap. Of course, that wasn't really ever going to happen. But again, it did show that I think Piastri did have very, very strong pace during this race. I think, and without him qualifying third, if he had qualified second, probably still loses to Verstappen. But again, I think all three of those drivers, Piastri, Norris, and Verstappen, whoever qualified on pole was almost certainly going to win that race. Again, unless you had some kind of issue in the pit stops where one of them had a really, really slow stop. And again, that almost happened with Norris and Verstappen pitting the same lap. But yeah, Antonelli, very, very strong pace at this point. Again, pushing very, very hard. I think, yeah, so that was that part there. Lap 34, Lawson, Sainz both pit for soft tires, so they went out very, very long. I think Lawson was the last driver to pit. I guess both of them last drivers to pit on the soft tires. Lap 36, Verstappen told he can push. Norris within 1.5 seconds of Verstappen. Sainz overtakes Lawson for P16, so again, not really a big achievement there, and at turn 1. Lap 39, Verstappen Norris gap down to 1.2 seconds, and lap 43 is the radio stuff that I just mentioned with Piastri, basically trying to engineer a driver swap. Piastri basically, falling away a little bit from Norris, 1.1 second gap at that point, but again, it wasn't like he was falling away by seconds a lap. Lap 49, Piastri looks like he might make a lunge on Norris. He looked quite close, I think, going into turn 1. I think one of these laps around lap 45, but again, never really close enough to make an overtake. When you're in the same car, same straight line speed, same cornering speed, exit speed, very, very hard to make an overtake. So again, understandable that he wasn't really able to get that done. Sainz overtakes Hulkenberg for P15 and then overtakes Duel for P14. So a couple overtakes towards the end, but your final lap, Max Verstappen takes the checkered flag and he wins the 2025 Japanese Grand Prix. Very, very strong drive from Verstappen, basically perfect. I don't really, again, for my power rankings tomorrow, not going to be super hard to decide who's going to be number 1 there. Rounding out the podium are the two McLarens, Norris ahead of Piastri, and I really feel like one of those McLarens should have won the Grand Prix today, but Verstappen just that much better than the two of them, and basically got the absolute most out of his Red Bull. P4 Leclerc, assuming that he doesn't get disqualified again, good solid result, and again, good for him to start getting points in the bag. 5th and 6th are your two Mercedes, Russell ahead of Antonelli. I think Antonelli was about a second or two off of Russell in the end, so quite close there. And, Antonelli's improved quite a bit the last 3 races, to the point where, he's only a couple seconds off, Antonelli or a couple seconds off Russell in a race where there's no safety cars. And again, did have a bit of a pretty aggressive tire strategy, but that helped. But still very impressive from the young Italian. 7th, Lewis Hamilton, not a great race for him, but an 8th, very impressive result for Isaac Hadjar, his first points in F1 there. 9th, Albon, another consistent points finish. I think he's finished in the points all 3 Grand Prix, so good result for him. 10th, Behrman, good result as well for the rookie, and gets points in back-to-back weekends. 11th, Alonso. 12th, Tsunoda. Not a great Grand Prix for Tsunoda for sure. He probably would have wanted to get back in the points, especially with the pace that Verstappen showed that was in there in that Red Bull somewhere. And this unfortunately extends Red Bull's second seat streak of no points to 5 Grand Prix. They have not scored since Perez scored a P10 at the Las Vegas Grand Prix last fall. So it's been quite the streak. 3 different drivers, of course. And again, with this being Tsunoda's first weekend with no testing, everything, I think, it's fair to cut him a little bit of slack. But again, this is a track that he knows very, very well. And this was basically the perfect place for him. Maybe Bahrain would have been a little better, but this is one of the best tracks he probably could have debuted at. 14th, 13th Gasly, 14th Sainz, 15th Duel, 16th Hulkenberg, 17th Lawson, 18th Ocon, 19th Bortoletto, and 20th Stroll. The only driver who is a lap down. I think he did a 2-stop strategy for some reason. Without that, you might have a Grand Prix with no driver's lap, no safety cars, which I don't think that's ever happened in F1 history. A race with no safety cars, and all drivers being on the lead lap. But I think there's a chance that happens this year, just because the reliability is so strong, and so again minimizes risk of safety cars, and the gaps between the teams are so small. So taking a look at your championship standings, after 3 rounds, Lando Norris is still your drivers' championship leader, but that gap to Max Verstappen is now very, very small. Only a single point, despite the fact that I think McLaren have had the best car by a decent margin those 3 races. Now, third, Piastri moves up a spot, 49 points for him. And then you have the 2 Mercedes, 4th and 5th, Russell on 45, Antonelli on 30. 6th is Leclerc, 20 points for him. 7th, Albon on 18. Is that 18? Yes, that is. And then Hamilton in 8th with 16, followed by Stroll and Ocon on 10 points. I think, Ocon should be ahead of Stroll on countback, but again, not a big deal. 11th, Hulkenberg on 6, 12th, Behrman on 5, 13th Hadjar on 4 points, and then Tsunoda in 14th on 3 points. Of course, all 3 of those points scored in the sprint in China. 15th in Sainz with 1 point, and then Gasly, Lawson, Bortoletto, Alonso, and Duel yet to get off the mark, all on 0 points. Taking a look at the Constructors' Championship, McLaren extend their lead there, 111 points for them, the first team into the past the century mark. Mercedes are second with 75, and then Red Bull are 61, of course, all coming from Max Verstappen. 4th are Ferrari on 36? Yeah, 36 points for them. 5th, Williams on 19, followed by Haas in 6th with 15. Aston Martin in 7th, 10 points, all coming from Stroll, surprisingly enough. Again, I do think that's going to change in a couple races, but Alonso finished 11th today. I'm sure he'll get in the points in a couple races time. 8th, Racing Bulls with 7, 9th, Sauber on 6, and Alpine, the only team yet to get off the mark, which I think is a bit of a surprise given they were looking at like the perhaps fifth fastest team in winter testing. So a bit of a surprise they don't have any points. A bit unfortunate with things happening in Australia, and again with Gasly's disqualification in China. But again, today they weren't really close to the points. Let's see. Actually, where did Gasly finished 13th, so again, not particularly close to the point. So there you go. There's my review of the 2025 Japanese Grand Prix. Not the most exciting Grand Prix, I must say. Good racing at the, tight racing, I should say. Tight racing at the front between the top 3. So again, there was a bit of tension throughout the whole Grand Prix in that respect. It wasn't like most of 2023 where, Verstappen had a 20-second lead on the field. So again, in that respect, I think it probably saves this Grand Prix from being kind of an all-time dud. But that being said, that's my review for the Grand Prix. I'll be back tomorrow with my power rankings. So thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.